time to time, they would bring in many scholars. H.C. Robbins Landon, Otto Strasser, who was the president of the Vienna Philharmonic and also played in many of the performances with many of the famous composers of that time and conductors of the time, played in smaller ensembles. My first time here in 1986, I was fortunate to hear Otto Strasser's lecture on the history of the Vienna Philharmonic. I also had the great fortune to sing a little bit with, do some Schubert with Jörg Demus. And this is what Don and Ann had in mind when they created this festival 38 years ago, to bring people in from Austria who knew the style of the music. Another person they brought in was Vera Schwartz. And I have the lecture notes from Ed Rath's wife, who is Lois, who took notes, I think, at one of the first lectures by Vera Schwartz. Now, in the past, Don has done this lecture, and I'd be absolutely lying to you if I would say, oh, it's no pressure for me to be standing here, and Don Moses is in row 38 of this hall. But, because he's done this lecture, I think, 95 times before. But Vera Schwartz would give this lecture to the students and to all of us at the beginning of the festival, so we could then apply her rules of interpretation in Haydn's music. They're sometimes referred to as the 10 points. Don used that title for many years. When I saw the original notes from Vera's first lecture, I thought, you know, I want to change this back, or at least for this year, go back to the rules of interpretation. Rules are things we need to follow, okay? And these rules of interpretation, there are 10 of them. We neglect no rests. Breaths are natural breathing points, and fermatas are natural stopping points in the music. Rests in classical music, as well as in earlier music, fall into 5 categories. We're going to look at the first as form, and think of the movements or the space between the Kyrie and the Gloria. That's a form. There's also sometimes movements like the Gloria or the Credo that have multiple movements within a movement. So we're going to show you one that defines form. Rests in the music that define form. Between the movements of the Credo, I could have taken more time. Even the way one of the violinists went and reached for her music created a different atmosphere. Okay, so I will ask them to, during those spaces, the rests that create form, relax, let the music breathe, and take your time. Acoustical rests, we're going to look at something from Elias. We're going to look at Elijah, because there's a couple of movements in there that use this rule of interpretation of rests very well. This is your movement where Baal, you are screaming for Baal, and you're asking him to answer you. Long, short, and sometimes we will add beats, sometimes we can take less time or more time. And beat, 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 beat. Rest can also be for emphasis. Rest for emphasis. It's something that I'll never forget. The first time I heard Dr. Moses give the lecture really changed the way I looked at music, all music, the rest of my life. So I remember taking these notes down. Don said, I have my notes. I should have given these notes to you. And I said, I already had taken them from years ago and copied them. So I'm reading many of the notes that Don actually had produced in his lectures. But think about rests for emphasis. And rest for emphasis, notes that follow rest always sound louder. You need to take more time with them. And sometimes the rest will take, as we did in the Elias, will take more than written in the score, more time. It could be 2 beats, I might take 4. With the rests, more than 2 beats. Let the music breathe. It's a little bit of a dramatic effect for emphasis. Let's move on to the last category in rests. It's called for tempo. We're going to create how we set a tempo, how Haydn in many of his works, and think about the year he wrote this piece, 1802. This was his 12th Mass. Haydn was an older man, more secure. His compositional styles and skills were mastered at this point in the Harmonia Mass. Many of the movements start with great confidence, like the beginning of a Kyrie. It's steady. There's a confident, as I mentioned, a confidence manner or tempo. Very different than, recently I conducted Beethoven's First Symphony. If you think of how he starts his First Symphony, Or with Haydn, it's different. If you look at the Kyrie again, the first movement, the security and the confidence and steadiness in how he produces this first tempo also gives us time to work the pauses within the first measures, the first 16 measures, 8 measures, 3 measures. If you look at that first maybe 4 measures, he's probably asking all of us as musicians to do 15 or 16 different things. So let's try the first couple measures. Our first rule. There are 5 elements when you're talking about rests, and we must remember to take time to breathe in Haydn's music. Neglect no rests. Breaths are natural breathing points, and fermatas are natural stopping points in the music. Rule number 2, 2 equal notes. You heard us at the beginning play the excerpt 1, where I asked him to play every note with equal value. Equal weight. The rule is 2 notes of equal value are not always equal in character. Now this is hard. We mentioned it in rehearsal yesterday. We like to emphasize the ends of phrases in America. And I mentioned, like go tea, oh say can you sing. Where in many of our phrases here, at the end of the phrase, there are 2 notes, D. The 2 notes cannot be of equal value. This comes from the Austrian language. I mentioned earlier, when you listen to an Austrian greet you or say goodbye or hello, it's Auf Wiedersehen. And somebody from Germany might go, Auf Wiedersehen. Guten Tag. In Austria, Grüß Gott. Auf Wiedersehen. Listen to how they speak. And it's always interesting when Kathy and I come a little bit, get here before you folks do. We'll go out to the cafes. And I'm always amazed at how quiet the cafes are. There might be 40 people sitting in Ricci's talking, and they have their dogs next to them, and they're talking like this. And you can hear these little whispers and the shapes of their sound. Then, August 1st comes, and we get Americans in Eisenstadt. And I can always hear you first. Because the language is different. Our language is different. So we must be really aware of this. In the rule number 2, 2 equal notes, as I mentioned in your score, this comes from the text. We must have correct syllabic stress. Now you are singing in languages that are probably not foreign to you, but we need syllabic stress, the poetic shape. This will create a variety and an inner rhythm within the text, phrase, and music. Chorus, why don't we sing your Kyrie, measure 17. sing your part? That's a double dot, right? Yeah. I think he's reminding us to double dot the rhythms. And so after we've said it once, as a chorus reminder, the bass comes in with a written double dot, saying, make sure, key. So the double dot that he's singing is a really good reminder for us that we're double dotting all these things. Now, yours, ki, ri, ele, right? Not equal notes. 2 consecutive notes, like that. Okay, cannot be with equal character. Okay, chorus, sing it. Ready? And down. Off. Yeah, get off before the downbeat. Kyrie ele. Put a space after the Kyrie ele. Syllabic stress, the way I like to mark it in my scores, is put a box around the syllable that needs the stress. Ki, okay, chorus, and. Basses, as you descend, you must sing louder, okay? With your of this excerpt 7, the note stress, that 2 consecutive notes should not have equal weight or equal character. Let's talk about the shaping of the first phrase, okay, of the entire piece. Just listen to it. And the variety within the notes needs to be much greater. Ready? 1, 3. She can stretch out her melody. We will not change the tempo underneath the accompaniment that you hear in the violins. But we're going to ask her to take more time with the melody. Put some rubato at the end.